thank you all for being here. I'm Alan Steinfeld. I have just written this book, Making Contact, where Darryl Anka has a prime chapter because I feel we have to talk to the contactees if we're really going to talk about what contact's about. If we're really going to be making contact, we need to talk to the people who are making contact. And Darryl's had a 38-year ongoing connection. Mark Sims in 2012 had a connection with a being called Tejbar. Sinead, give us a little background about you, because I know you're very connected. And then I want to ask a general question. Go ahead.
Sure thing. Thanks, Maya. Thank you for having me, Alan. I really appreciate being here. It's wonderful to be here. So I'm an assistant to Grant Cameron.
Who might be showing up at some point. I really would like Grant Cameron to be here.
Yes. Hopefully he's coming in. So I am an experiencer. I'm a lifelong experiencer. I had a series of experiences as a child. Most significantly, probably a series of really intense downloads between age 9 and 11. And then later on went to Peru in 2017 and met a bunch of light beings there, which was not expected. I didn't ask for that to happen. It just occurred. And that was at the end of some very long, deep personal work and research into topics I was just seeking and trying to find more. So when I met them, I kind of felt like that was a gift. And then after that, things really started to speed up. In summer of 2019, I had a massive awakening. And 2 months later, I met Grant, and things have just been flowing ever since then. So quite a lot's been going on. Yeah, that's the gist of it.
Thank you. We'll come back to you. And I want to just introduce Carolyn Cory, who's just produced a movie called, wait, don't tell me, Superhuman. And she's making her new movie called about ET contact, kind of the science of ET contact, right?
Yes, that's right. The new movie is, for now, it's called A Tear in the Sky, but we're still kind of not talking too much about it. But basically, it's about UAP, but more the science and the investigation as opposed to cover-ups and stuff like that. But my latest movie is Superhuman: The Invisible Made Visible. I think everybody should watch this movie. It's about mind over matter, consciousness, how it all works. So I really encourage everybody to watch that movie.
So for everyone who's watching now, and thanks to Mark for producing this, we are in a new phase of contact, the contact experience. Not that it's different for people who've had contact, but for the rest of the world, they're coming online. So I'm here at Laughlin, Nevada with, it's called the MegaCon. And I just talked with Danny Sheehan, who's working with Mark Sims. And Danny and Mark are putting together, you want to tell people what you're putting together, Mark?
Sure.
Yes, go ahead.
You're on mute. Unmute, yeah. Unmute, Mark.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, because okay, sorry, I got it. Go ahead. You're on.
All right. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
Perfectly.
Hi. Thank you for having me, Alan and Mark, and it's really great to be here with this amazing group of people. So Danny and I met back in 2015 when he called me and invited me to come out to Santa Cruz to visit him and share my encounter of 2012, in which I met face to face a light being, or a celestial being as he called himself. And I posted this encounter, the story of my encounter, on YouTube, and Danny came across it and then contacted me. And so that's how we met back in 2015. And out of that meeting, he shared with me a vision that he and Dr. John Mack had put together while John was still alive. Back in the early days in the 90s, when he was representing John at Harvard to save his job, they had brainstormed about the importance of establishing a people's diplomacy initiative for citizens of the world of high standing, whether they be scientists, academics, theologists, politicians, to find these people and come together in a discussion about how would we initiate diplomatic relations with these beings from another dimension, another world, etc. And so when John Mack was tragically killed in 2006, that kind of went on the back burner. And when I met him in 2015, I provided the seed money to launch the new Paradigm Institute. And we formed this institute at Berkeley at a place called Holy Hill. It's a 1 square mile location just across the street from the University of California, Berkeley, where all the major theologies, religions of the world have established a headquarters for academic study. These are all progressive academics from Islam, from Hinduism, from Buddhism, from Catholicism, from Christianity, all the different sects. And our idea was to approach all these academic theologians about having a conversation on this topic. What would it mean to engage extraterrestrials in a dialogue? And what would it mean to, from a theological and a philosophical standpoint, to these major religions if all of a sudden it was discovered that we're not alone, and helping prepare them for this inevitability? So Danny and I hired an executive director who lived there for 2 years. It didn't go very far, unfortunately, but we've continued talking about this, and we're at a point now where we're launching a virtual institute, a virtual Paradigm Institute, where we can have people from around the world engaging in a discussion on this topic. And so I'm launching the new the harmonic convergence in July. This will be the second that I've done. Last July, I did a 10-day event that was free called the Harmonic Convergence 2020. And I'm doing it again this year, but I'm doing it on the observation deck, which is a virtual platform where Captain Ron and Lori and Michael Moriarty have established a place where people can congregate and educate themselves and talk to thought leaders and, you know, some of these amazing people to have this dialogue. And so we're working with that kind of environment to do this. So that's it.
That's great. Okay, good. No, thank you. I'm just going
And,
to jump in here.
Oh,
That's okay.
yeah, you can speak through my speaker.
Oh, okay. So the idea is that this is a new time for human beings and the relationship. And what Danny Sheehan's really putting together is a people's institute, like it's the people, not the government, that's going to lead the march into the unknown. So I want to ask Darryl, you know, with the upcoming like release of information, are you getting messages from Bashar? Is something happening in your world, or what do you feel like is shifting on the planet based on your relationship?
Well, first of all, hi to everyone on the panel. It's great to see everyone and meet some of you for the first time. Bashar has talked about that a little bit, and actually he's going to talk about it more in the upcoming event that we're doing in July that he's actually titled Breaking News. But he has mentioned this, that what we're seeing now on a lot of the major news networks about their discussions and release of the information from the Navy and other military institutions about some of the sightings that they're now validating, is he has said this is the early stages of disclosure, but he said to pay attention to how different people are using this information. Some of them will be using the idea that ETs exist or that these UFOs are authentic in a positive way, and some of them might be using it in a negative way. So he's just basically saying to make sure that even though we are now receiving some authentic information, just to, you know, use your common sense and take the information with a grain of salt with regard to what people are actually going to be saying about why these ETs or these UFOs are here, because he's basically saying focus on the idea that this is a positive event. Don't focus on the idea that people might be using this to manipulate, to control, or scare or make people afraid of what's going on. So he said we just have to stay balanced and stay in the center with all this information that is coming out and more information that will be coming out in the near future. Alan, we can't hear you. Alan, we can't hear you.
Oh, okay, sorry. So, Darryl, let me just ask you if Danny Sheehan is going to put together a panel, a people's movement, and you've been 4 decades of contact, what would you suggest to someone creating an organization that was going to establish relationships on the behalf of the people of planet Earth with these beings? What would you suggest to be part of that platform of people of Earth?
Well, I would suggest what basically Bashar suggests, which is, people have a certain state of being about them based on what they strongly believe to be true about themselves in life. And his suggestion is to really get a handle on letting go of our fear-based beliefs, letting go of negativity, of really putting ourselves out there and taking actions that are positive actions. Because to Bashar, the language of physical reality isn't words, it's behavior, it's action. So the things that we do that are positively oriented toward the idea of being open to realizing that we're not alone, to realizing that there are others in the cosmos that are interested in forming a connection with us, our side of the work is to raise our own vibrations and make ourselves more equal, in a sense, vibrationally more compatible with beings that may be somewhat more advanced than us on certain levels. And so it really takes a lot of working on ourselves and promoting information that allow people to be themselves, to follow their paths, to follow their passions in life, to be true to themselves, to communicate clearly about what kind of a world we really prefer to have, and to take the necessary actions to create that world so that the ETs can see that we're not just giving it lip service, that we truly are taking the actions necessary to make the world what it can be and what the ETs can help us make the world. But we're the ones that really have to start taking the initiatives and the actions to show them, to demonstrate to them that this is something that we really truly prefer our world to be, is to be open this way and to make connections and to better ourselves and uplift ourselves and to become part of a larger family in the cosmos.
Alan, you're muted again. Alan, we can't hear you.
Alan's had ongoing contact since she was 5 years old. So if you were to create a people's platform initiative, how would you want to structure something like that, Carolyn?
Yeah, I think it's important, first of all, to maybe allow people to share their experiences. As you were saying, I started having experiences since I was 5, and I'm not a typical experiencer in the sense that I wasn't like abducted or things like that, or I didn't just meet grays and that's it. I had a range of different types of beings appear, communicate with me, all kinds of different types of encounters. And so I think it's important to expand the parameters of what we think contact is. That's the first thing. So if we can allow more people to talk about different types of not just beings, but experiences, I think this will also evolve the conversation to a new level. So, because I think it's right now, it's only like, we're abducted by a gray, we see 3, scary, So I think that is very important to evolve it to the next level of what the experience looks like, who the beings are. Yesterday I was talking to Grant on his podcast. There's a whole range of beings that nobody talks about, and so because the more we allow those types of conversations and added information, the more the picture starts to change. We're not just focused on, like it's us against them and they have a better technology and that's that. There's so much more to the topic of experience and the experiencer than we think is what's been publicized or talked about so far. So to me, that is a very, very, very important, huge aspect of what should be taking place. And to begin to incorporate the mechanism, because again, what are we doing here? We're trying to understand who we are. We think we want to understand who they are, what they're doing, what their agenda is, but we're asking these questions to figure out who we are. And so that's the reason why we need to, first of all, expand that picture, like I said, but start to talk about the mechanism that takes place in our consciousness to be able to be abducted or to tap into this or to download that or whatever. That also starts to bring a little bit of the science. It makes the whole topic, I want to say fuller, you know what I mean? More substantial, more real, and I think more relatable, because then you would also be attracting more of the mainstream person who thinks that, this is like for some few people who saw a UFO in the sky, whatever. It's just a few people who can do this or whatever. That's not for me. I don't agree. Now through my movie, Alan, every day I get dozens and dozens of emails from people, all kinds of people, judges, mayors, lawyers, medical doctors, people who had nothing to do with new age stuff or alternative stuff or UFO stuff, who tell me, just by watching your movie, I realized that I've had some sort of experience. I'm not sure what it is. I'm not sure how it is. So that's the reason why I think we need to introduce the bigger concept of consciousness and the mechanism, and perhaps even the spiritual aspect, not religious, so that more people are interested in this conversation and make it more normal. I'm kind of tired of being called paranormal. What is paranormal? It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Maybe we are the normal. And, it's like, what is even normal?
Paranormal, actually. Or
yeah.
Almost normal. Right.
Yeah. So that's what I mean. I think it needs to be more substantial and bring those additional components. That would be my input.
So, the papers, the media, they don't know what to do with this. The government doesn't know what to do. They can't explain it. So it comes down to the contactees, the people who had contact, to start to explain to the people what's going on. But they won't even mention the A word. They won't even say they'll say, there's stuff out there, UAPs, but they won't tell you who's flying it, who could be flying. No, they're just out there. There's no sense of like, there's an intelligence behind it. Yeah, there's stuff in our sky. We don't know what it is. It may, but they're not, but this is where I think the bigger approach has to take. And I'd love for this discussion to sort of lay the foundations of what a people's diplomacy initiative would look like. So Sinead, you're an educator. You've worked in that kind of administrative capacities. You're an ET contact. So what would be the foundation to start if we're going to lay out rules of diplomacy or for a worldwide agenda? And that's what Danny and Mark are talking about. Do you know what I'm asking? Because I'm not really sure what I'm asking, but do you know what I'm asking?
I do fortunately have a clue about what you're asking. Thanks, Alan. And hello, everybody as well. It's a pleasure, really a pleasure and an honor to be here to have this conversation with you all. So in terms of foundation, I think, we need to stop thinking about the us and them thing, and we need to stop buying into mainstream media narratives, which are very obviously constructed and are being done in a very, deliberate kind of way. It's a rollout, right? It's not an accident. There's no real leaks. Like, this is all done on purpose. So that narrative is kind of leading us more towards the idea that they, whoever they may be, and of course we're learning more and more about the wide variety of beings that have always been here and come here now. But you know, that they are not actually the threat. Like, we are our own worst enemy. You know, if you just look at human history, you know, there are horrific things that we have done and that we do to ourselves, that we do to each other, that we do to nature, that we do to animals.
Worse, we have been so inhuman to other humans. We've committed so much atrocity and Holocaust, and yeah, we have a lot more to fear from each other than we do.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, our willingness to, our avoidance of looking at that in some ways, and our willingness to say it's them, you know, it's the unknown, it's the big scary aliens who are going to come and get us. You know, our willingness to avoid ourselves and project that outwards is very typical of an aspect of human behavior where we don't want to. I mean, when we were talking to Caroline yesterday, I think I phrased it something like, you know, it's the vegetable that you don't want to eat on your plate. You know, it's the last thing you want to deal with. You don't want to look at your fear. You don't want to look at your ego. But if we're going to have a relationship, an intergalactic relationship with all these other beings who are clearly around us and have always been here as well and want to communicate with us, then we need to start taking ownership. You know, we really need to realize that this is a partnership. We are not passive. We have to do our part, like what Darryl was saying, right? It's all about action. It's very easy to say the words. It's very easy to put really nice sounding sentences together, but the language is not the point. And language is actually very limiting, right? Because so much of the information we get from them is energy. It's vibration. It's not in words, and we can't put it into words either. Sometimes it's very difficult to do that. So, you know, in terms of the foundation, the communication has to have a solid foundation of trust and of willingness to be open and realize that they are friends, that they are here to collaborate with us for the benefit of all of us and of this planet, as well as the intergalactic community that we're part of. So, you know, that to me is very, very key, is owning the parts of ourselves, right? Being willing to do that personal work where we confront our fear, our ego, and how we see things is so black and white, so us and them, you know, so up and down, good and bad. It just isn't like that.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with all that.
Past 60 years, but I just want to say, for the past 60 years,
wait.
they portrayed.
Oh, sorry.
Sure. Okay.
Mark, is that you, Mark?
Yeah. But
Mark,
for the
we
last
don't see you. Darryl's going to say something. Go ahead, Mark.
Okay.
And then
No, it's all right.
The last 60 years, they portrayed the aliens as a negative being. Something, right. When we were younger, we were supposed to be scared of aliens because they were the horror movies. But I think people's viewpoints are changing. I mean, they have changed.
Yes.
I think the people are ready, and the government just isn't letting us be ready.
Yeah, well, this is the point. I mean, I agree with everyone with what you've all said. And I think the idea you just brought up, Mark, is, you know, those scary alien movies are really just us projecting our fears onto them. Yeah. We're just using them, you know, to reflect that. And, you know, I agree with what Carolyn's saying. You know, we need to have a lot more understanding of the different types of interactions that are going on with the different types of beings, that it's a broad spectrum. It's not just one or two types. We do have a tendency to kind of lump them all into one group and just think that they all think the same and all approach this the same, and they don't. There's quite a wide variety of approaches going on, as far as I can see. And what Sinead said is important too, because I think it's really what I touched on earlier about the idea of really getting in touch with our own fear-based beliefs and letting them go. We just need to be far more transparent with ourselves so that we can really show other beings who we really are instead of hiding ourselves because we're afraid. So it's like, you know, in many of the events we've done and the channelings we've done, and the reason that we did, you know, we made the documentary First Contact about the channeling that I do and about who Bashar is because of what you said, Caroline. We want to kind of bring some of this into the scientific realm. So, you know, one of the things we did was to show that when I did a channeling state, I had my head wired to an EEG machine to see what's going on in the brain during a channeling state. And what we really discovered is that everyone has this ability. It's not a foreign ability. We're all naturally capable of achieving these different altered states in our brain that represent a higher function and a way to connect to ourselves and to others more deeply. It's just basically the gamma state, which between 40 and 100 cycles per second in the brain. So that was one of the things we did in the documentaries, because we wanted to demystify this stuff. And like you said, none of this is really supernatural. It's just nature we don't understand yet. And we're trying to, quantify that slowly over time. But we wanted to just show that everyone has the ability to get into the proper state to be more of themselves, and to really just put our true selves out there so that we are more transparent and not hiding in this compartmentalized way we tend to think, so that we don't even know, like you said, who we are. I think it's really important to become far more transparent.
Well, the government isn't even transparent. This over there, the leaders, how do we expect? Well, maybe we are, because we're in the
right. But that's the issue to me, is we, in a sense, really, we are the government. In other words, if we're going to keep people in there who are not willing to reflect what the people themselves are saying they prefer, then we have to take the actions to do something about changing that, because we are the government. And Bashar has often said, look, it's not a surprise that we're staying at arm's length, because you talk about, look at all the strife going on, look at the wars that are going on, look at all the fear that's on the planet. So it's up to us to really create the kind of world that we really say we prefer, and to take the actions to do so peacefully, lovingly, but not backing down, not standing down. So, the idea really is, as Bashar often says, look, we're not here to save you, we're not here to rescue you, it's your planet. You have to do something to let us know you want to be a part of this cosmic family. And so take those actions. You are your governments. Don't have the, as someone said, I think it was maybe Sinead or all of you, don't have the they versus us mentality even within your own society. You have to understand that everyone is acting based on their belief systems. What they've been brought up to believe is a truth for themselves, and a lot of that is fearful truth. So it's about clearing that out and getting people to know, look, there's enough for everybody. We don't have to hoard. We don't have to hide. We don't have to be afraid. We can figure this out. But we have to act like we actually are the people who live on this planet, and make a statement by our actions in a number of other ways as to who we really are and what we really prefer Earth to be.
Well, we have one of our inside agents, Danny Sheehan, going to Washington. I can say that he said it publicly,
on June 15th.
On June 15th, to talk to inspector generals as Luis Elizando's lawyer, to start to really make a case for the American people that it's time for the truth to come out. And if people don't know who Danny Sheehan is, actually we're in his hotel room, but if you don't know who he is, he defended Karen Silkwood. He was involved in the Pentagon Papers. He, what else? He was at Standing Rock helping the Native Americans. He is the people's lawyer. We need that lawyer as the American people to come forward and say, yes, what is the Declaration of Independence say? We the people demand, transparent government. So you've been working with Danny a lot. So what are the principles you guys are putting down to start this people's movement?
Yeah. Well, I just want to add a few things before I answer that question about Danny. Danny is a true hero, and his wife, Sarah Nelson. They have an institute called the Romero Institute that you can check out at romeroinstitute.org. Right on the front page, you can learn a little bit about the both of them. But basically, they were the co-founders of the Christic Institute that brought the case against the government for the Iran-Contra affair, and actually prosecuted some people as an outcome of that. But related to the ET phenomenon, he was the lawyer for Dr. John Mack and saved his job back in the 1990s when John was under attack by the president of the Clinical Psychology College, of which he was a member. And then he was the general counsel for Dr. Stephen Greer during the Disclosure Project in 2001. And then he's also been involved in the Citizens Disclosure Project that was more recent. So he's been involved in this for a very long time. And he's also, by the way, the founder of the Lakota Law Project, which is lakotalaw.org. You can see that also on the webpage on the Romero Institute. So this guy is an amazing human being, just a real role model. And so I look to him for a lot of advice, and the two of us have been talking about this very challenging initiative. How does one go about establishing diplomatic relationships with extraterrestrials? And so there's a lot of questions, the first of all, who should that be representing the human family? Who can we trust with that responsibility? So clearly it needs to be a transparent process in terms of how that begins. Who's going to be representing us? What are they going to say if they establish communications, and how should they establish communications? And once communications is established, then what? What do we want to ask them? What do we want to say to them? I anticipate that once we figure that out and communications or relationships are established, then there needs to be the big meeting, right, where they land, at the White House, or at the mall in Washington D.C. Wherever this place is. It's got to be safe for them. It's got to be a neutral place. I don't know that the mall would be my first choice if I were the ETs. So this is a process, but we need to start coming together and having this discussion, and we need people who are smart, who are responsible, who are respectful, and understand the history, the very rich and long history of this phenomenon. And also, I believe it's important for us to establish some kind of shared core values and mission about this initiative. Like, for instance, do I believe that ETs are malevolent? Well, I believe there may be a faction that's malevolent, but I believe by and large, there's a large contingency of benevolent ETs that are simply waiting for us to reach out to them in the right way, responsibly, with a good collection of representatives of our planet, of our human family, and we begin that process. So this is a big undertaking, and this is what we're going to be doing for the Harmonic Convergence 2020 event, which is again from July 5th to July 14th. This is the theme of that 10-day event is going to be establishing and launching the human or the People's Diplomacy Initiative.
But I think I was going to say Bashar, I think has. I mean,
well, let me
go ahead because
I think that's great. We obviously do have to come from our side, but I want to add to that is to not forget that the aliens and ETs are coming from their side as well. So in other words, the idea of, and I'm not in any way, shape, or form saying it has to be me, but they may have some idea also about why they're contacting all the people they're contacting about who represents humans on Earth. I don't think it's going to be just up to us to decide that. I think they're showing us by how they're contacting people that it's a much larger we the people public kind of a thing than just we're going to have one official like we do for the typical government kind of activity. I think we should definitely move in that direction from our side, and also maybe think a little bit more broadly about that. But I think we're going to be surprised to find out that it's not necessarily going to be just up to us to figure out how those interactions will happen, because I think we're already seeing that by how they're contacting people, they're already showing us to some degree their side of how first contact will also happen. Because in a sense, kind of as Bashar says, they've been doing this a lot longer with other civilizations than we have. So they kind of know what needs to happen. And so I want to just not shut out the idea that we shouldn't be looking for their cues to us as well as to how they think an actual meeting and first contact, open contact would actually occur. I think it might be a little broader than we think.
Right. Is that true? You get that too, Carolyn, that, from your contact experience that you've as you're downloading this ET connection, that they have a plan of how they're proceeding that, maybe we're not even in touch with at this point?
Yeah, totally. To me, I feel like it's a much, much bigger story. I mean, from that perspective, I call it the divine plan. In fact, I wrote the book, The Divine Plan, because from that perspective, it is so much bigger and it's multidimensional. From our little perspective, we're waiting for one guy to come to the podium and tell us, yes, believe in aliens. Yes, we did catch we do have an alien body. Roswell was real, blah, blah, blah. We're waiting for this tiny little one guy to validate something that is enormous, something that has been happening for eons on this planet and is still happening so multidimensionally through all these different beings, through all these different things, through all these different experiences. And so that's the problem. So Darryl, I totally agree with you. Also, we are so programmed to fail. Like the human, I work with, like deprogramming and regression and all kinds of stuff with hundreds of people. So the kind of like the default setting of the human brain is, I'm not good enough. I'm a failure. I don't know who I am. Therefore, I need to look for answers outside myself. I mean, that is at the root of all our problems. We rely on big pharma to heal us. We rely on government to validate what we should believe in. We rely on all kinds of authority figures outside of us to tell us who we are. And that is at the core of and here we are doing it again. We're waiting for the one guy to tell me, yes, you're right, you did have an experience. I don't need that. I know it's real. And so I agree with Darryl big time. So I think it is very, very important to have people like Danny Sheehan. Oh my God, he is a real hero. He is such a huge hero to be out there. To me, it's not so much to get the one guy to tell us the truth. What he's doing is triggering the principle of truth in government. That's what he's doing. And so he just wants people like him, wants the people who represent us, we the people, to speak the truth. So, so that's why I think he's crucially important in that process of bringing truth. But at the same time, we need to be out there, like I said, and just keep talking, just keep exploring and stop waiting for someone outside ourselves to speak up. And when we do that, so to me, from their perspective, they're saying, it's already been laid out. Just be it, do it, say it. And the more you do, the ET, I don't want to call it agenda because it sounds like so, like it's it has a negative connotation. To me, the divine plan unfolds very, very organically, eloquently. And so that's the reason why, like you were saying, Darryl, it's really up to us to bring it out as it comes out. So all of a sudden, I'm telling you, right now, everybody's focused on this report. Everybody's focused, June, blah, 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 we're waiting for this big thing. And at the same time, I think that this is phase one. Okay. It's later. It's just that what this is really going to do, it's going to confuse us even more because one guy is going to say this and this is non-conclusive and this is classified, blah, blah, blah. But what it is going to do, it is going to trigger more confidence in the people who are having experiences, who they're going to be like, wait, Congress is talking about it. Why can't I talk about it? So that is, to me, the second phase where more and more and more people are going to be comfortable talking about these types of things. It's going to be global. And it's going to be this one guy, the ET is going to show up, but not through government. It's going to show up in your background, Mark, or in my background, or does that make sense?
Yep.
That's how the real disclosure is going to happen, in my opinion. Does that make sense?
No, it does make. I just want to ask Sinead, because she is, like I said before, educated. There are principles of educating a population or a classroom. What do you think some of these principles should be, and then we have a special guest. But go ahead, Sinead.
Well, I definitely agree with Darryl in terms of, not getting so attached to what we think the right way to do it is, and coming only from our own perspective, and also not even having an attachment to, the way things have always been done, typically when you enter into a diplomatic dialogue. I think we really do need to be open and receptive to what's going to come our way in terms of their guidance, right? Because they're definitely guiding us. They're definitely giving us advice and supporting us along the way, and being very helpful, right, to help us get to where we need to go. So we just need to be receptive to their feedback, I think, and, to treat them as we would anyone else. If you're going to be doing something collaboratively with a group of your best friends, you don't just decide yourself what all the decisions are going to be. You consult with the group, you listen to everyone, and it's an inclusive thing, right? So for me and my experience, that's their whole approach, is inclusivity. I don't feel, it feels very collaborative to me, the communication.
Yeah. I agree with you totally, Sinead. And, I think that the first step that needs to be taken is our step, that we need to get a serious contingent of people who know that this is a real phenomenon, and that the ETs are kind of waiting for us to make the initial, reach out. And so, that needs to be, we need to come together and have a discussion about that. And I think the key to that is, how do we do that in a transparent way that feels inclusive to the key people, like all of us here, that want to participate. And that's why creating a virtual platform where we can all gather, and this observation deck, if you haven't experienced it yet, is really a great example of what we're talking about, where you can have an avatar, you can talk to the leaders from, that are interested in this discussion, and they can present to large groups of people virtually, and then they can break off and you can have small gatherings, and everybody can participate, and you can, control the dialogue, in the sense that you're going to have a lot of people who want to shout and interrupt people, but you got to control that. And that's one of the problems we have in the real world with a place like Laughlin, where we're at now here at the Aquarius, is that you get some people who are not stable. Frankly, there are people that are kind of crazy, and they upset the apple cart and the energy, and so you really—
Are you talking about me? No.
and so that's why the virtual space is so key to this, I believe.
But thank you. No, you're absolutely right. I want to go back to Darryl, because Bashar seems to have laid out a plan. I mean, isn't it exciting, Darryl, and everyone here and everyone watching, that we are closer than ever to this thing blossoming, right? Don't you?
Well, yeah, I mean, the whole idea behind the information that comes through in the channeling is, as Bashar has explained it, is that's one of the things they're doing to initiate contact, is sharing information to see what we do with it, to see how we respond to it. That's what tells them how ready we are to go to the next step and the next step. So things like what we're talking about here is taking those ideas of, again, self-empowerment, transparency, and all that, and putting it into action, which is what they're kind of looking for. But they are already taking the steps. The fact that they're giving us information, the fact that they're sending energy to see what we do with it, is the way they initiate, at least from Bashar civilization, is the way they initiate the whole contact process. So they are already being very active in their own way. They're waiting to see if we're going to be able to match the actions that they're taking with us, because the giving of the information is not just for the purpose of saying howdy. It's really about incorporating an understanding of how things work, how the universe is, that they understand, and they're seeing how much of it we can absorb. This, to them, is the actual way they make the initial steps of contact. If people don't absorb the information, if they don't reach out, if they don't let themselves become enlightened and transparent and positive and creative and loving, then they know that the planet and the people, at least, are not that ready. But the fact that we are talking about these things is a response to what we've already been receiving from many different beings. So I think that that's a barometer they're taking into account, so that in a sense they've already taken the first step, and what this proposal is all about is actually the response that they're looking for are things like this, discussions like this, platforms like this, actions that people are taking to open up the possibility of more people knowing about these things and then making a decision. I mean, what you were saying about it being something that everyone ultimately is given an opportunity to become aware of. I already consider the idea of UFOs to be the biggest secret that everyone already knows. They're just not talking about it. So it's kind of like, yes, the more we can make it okay for people to say, here's my experience, like Caroline said, that's what's really going to be the response that the ETs are kind of looking for, is this wide, broad response, along with some of these very specific platforms that can help people know it's okay to talk about this. It's not an issue of ridicule. It's not a taboo anymore. This is something that's actually truly happening, and we need to really look at it and react to it and respond to it as a part of our reality now, because it always has been. We're just now at the point where we're finally beginning to acknowledge it. But a lot of the recognition also comes from the fact that they've been giving us information, like Caroline said, for thousands of years. And we're only just kind of waking up. One thing that's always stuck with me in terms of what Bashar said is, we ask for help. We often ask for more help. He said, you are already being given all the help you can possibly be given. Nothing is being withheld from you. So when we're asking for help, what we're actually asking for is to become more aware of the help we're already receiving. That's what the awakening is to be aware of what's really going on, not to think that it has to start. It's been going on. We have to catch up and be open to the fact that we are able to now recognize this has been happening, and then discuss these things and what do we want to do about what we now are becoming aware of.
Well, I think what Danny and Mark are doing, my guess from what I've heard, is also wanting to get the input from those beings, from the aliens, the ETs, whoever they are. It needs to be this two-way communication. And that's what this, I think, people's agenda and contact should be and is all about. I mean, Caroline, you've been working on this for 20 years yourself, opening people up to the fact that we are interacting with these beings and speaking as a kind of ambassador, would you say?
Yeah, I mean, because I've had direct experiences myself since I was 5. So nobody taught me at the age of 5 how to communicate telepathically. And so, that stayed with me. And then, communicating and connecting with other types of beings and seeing things, seeing, people's consciousness and kind of discerning what's going to happen the next day and getting validation, stuff like that. I realized that there is a mechanism. Maybe we don't understand it perfectly, but there is a mechanism. And oops, sorry. Sorry. And so there is a mechanism going on. And so it took me 20 years actually to figure out, what is this mechanism? How do I discern? I didn't make this up. What if the alien was never there? What if it's, what if it's true? What if it's my imagination? What if it's this and that? And so that's why I'm saying we have to really understand the mechanism to validate all of these experiences. So we stop saying, this is projection, we made it up, and there's an anomaly in your brain and this and that. And so that's the reason why I've been taught, not just lecturing and, teaching people, but really training all kinds of people to be able to do these things for themselves, because that's the only way the truth. Is when you have the experience. I can describe what a UFO looks like, or what a being looks like, what it looks like to come together with a being and merge and blah, 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 all you want. You can have an idea, but the minute you have the experience, I mean, your entire, on a cellular level, your whole life changes right then. So that's the reason why I've been really helping people have the experience of direct contact themselves, so that they can speak their own truth from within.
It's so key at this time that now there is official recognition. So people who've had these experiences can doubt themselves less. It's like, oh, yeah, I did see something. I did have a vision. I did have a dream. They did talk to me. This is, I think, an acceleration of the process that a lot of us have been so hard at work trying to establish for ourselves, So now we have a kind of more of a consensus reality. So the paradigm and what you and Danny have, the Paradigm Institute, and like the global paradigm can change. So we can now have these experiences as acceptable. And that's also a shift. So talk a bit about the whole idea of paradigm shifting and how we are moving into a world where, it's okay, Caroline, where we can validate experience and people can come forward with a new kind of a raison d'etre of being a higher intelligence.
Well, I have to agree with everyone that's spoken so far that's made this point, that they have to have their own experience to know it's true. And so I think that needs to be part of the strategy of how do we, with the people that are willing to sit down and try it, try doing some of the things that Carolyn teaches people and listen to Bashar. There's a lot of people that think Bashar's really out there and it's too woo-woo for them.
A lot of people, though, have to say love Bashar and take
I
some
love
of
Bashar.
Well, it doesn't matter. And to Bashar, the most important thing is the information, not him.
Yeah. No, I know, but the teachings of Bashar are what people value. But go ahead.
Yeah. I want to make it clear that I'm all on board, but there's a much larger population or percentage of the human family that don't know about Bashar, and then those that do, are a little apprehensive to want to spend any money and time listening to a guy who thinks he's channeling an extraterrestrial. I mean, and I used to be in that group. I used to be a skeptic and somebody who would just like, I'm not touching that.
Right.
But when I had my experience, it opened my mind. And so I think we see ourselves, I think all of us here, as innovators of a sort. And, people like Bashar and Darryl Anka, actually, who channels Bashar, are true trailblazers. And we kind of follow, in and take, that information they're providing and use it for ourselves so that we can then go and teach other people and encourage them to, hey, you got to listen to this guy.
Right.
It's some real powerful wisdom that's coming out of this, channeled being. And, and I can tell you that, there's something to it because I've had my own experience. Right. And so that's how I see our role.
Sinead, what were you going to say?
Well, actually, I wanted to share my favorite thing that Bashar says, because it ties into everything we're talking about right now. I have it on my refrigerator. I look at it every day, and it's a practice I try to do regularly, which is living in a state of our highest excitement without an attachment to the outcome. And that makes me think about the process that you're working towards, Mark, with creating this diplomatic system that we can use for communication to really form a deeper, more comprehensive relationship with our extraterrestrial friends and family, which is, I guess, how I would refer to them. So, when I think of that saying, live in a state of your highest excitement without an attachment to the outcome, that first of all connects directly back to what we were talking about 10 minutes ago. Having a mindset and thinking a lot about how to raise our vibration, doing things like taking on actions, initiatives to actively raise our vibration and to expand our own consciousness, right? To get into that energy field that we need in order to have that communication. So I don't know what the end result, is going to look like in terms of the diplomatic contact. But while they're in the process of creating this, I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind, right? Because it encompasses what we're talking about. In order to do this work, we have to be living in a place where we are nurturing that energy and that vibration in ourselves, and a sense of expansiveness in our hearts, right, as well as in our minds, and be open to what they're going to help us do. So, without an attachment to what it's going to look like, without an attachment to who's going to do it and what the structure is going to be and all that kind of stuff, because that will evolve naturally, that will come.
I also want to say, I agree with everyone here, and maybe we'll have a little guest appearance in a little bit, but we're living in such a strange world where people have been talking to aliens, Carolyn and Darryl, for years, for decades, and then there's a whole population saying, are there aliens? Are we alone? I mean, there's this spectrum of belief that we are enmeshed in, and like, yeah, even my own family, you don't really believe that stuff. I've had to fight for my beliefs. It's like, of course, how could you not believe it? So we are in this mesh of worldviews colliding, and this is where sort of the balance is being tipped at this point as we kind of approach this threshold. And people going to Washington and standing up for what we've known to be self-evident, truth passes through 3 stages, as Schopenhauer says. First, it's denied, then it's ridiculed, and then it becomes self-evident, where we're coming out of the ridicule phase because, self-evident, all you have to do is look at the sky. So I'm just commenting on how diverse the world is and what, there's still a struggle to make this case and people's experiences valid. There's still, I'm sure, lots of people out there will invalidate all of our experiences. So, and so that's part of this struggle, in a sense, to bring these agendas forward. Not only do we have to deal with the ETs, but we have to deal with each other, and we as kind of contactees are stuck in the middle of like both sides. We're pushing against both sides. And yeah, Darryl.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we have to think that we have to convince anybody that doesn't want to be convinced. It's just about moving forward if you find yourself with like-minded people who know what they've experienced. So it's really just about validating ourselves to move forward in the way that we prefer to. There are always probably going to be people who will not be able to validate that for themselves. And that's okay, because we're not trying to convince the world. We're just trying to demonstrate what we know as a truth and at least allow it to exhibit itself in the way that it is possible for it to do so. So I don't necessarily want to feel stuck between those things, because I'm not out to convince anybody. I often even say, you don't have to believe that Bashar is real. I can't prove it to you. I have my own proof for myself and my own experience. And that's why we say what's important is just listen to the information and try it, because the proof comes with the information. Anytime anyone has actually used the information he's given us, they actually get their own proof that the information itself works and changes reality. So it's not about anyone believing that Bashar is real. It's about them believing in themselves and using the information to make changes in their lives that they prefer to make. That's more convincing than anything. When somebody applies the information and they get an effect in their own lives and things change for the better in a very profound way, that's the most convincing thing. Like Caroline said, or Sinead said, it's experience. They get the experience themselves that, okay, well, since the information works, at least then it tips their mind like, well, gee, I don't know. Maybe it doesn't matter whether it comes from an ET or whether it's a higher level of the channel's own consciousness or whatever. The information works. And just by letting them in on that level, normally most people will suddenly start to realize there's more going on than they thought. Because once they get into that level, you start perceiving things differently. You have to, as Bashar says, this is really just physics. You cannot perceive what you're not the vibrational level of. So if you change your vibrational level, you do start perceiving that other things are going on. So in that sense, it sort of takes care of itself. And it's not really about having to worry about convincing anyone. Everyone has to be allowed to believe what they want to believe, so that we can be allowed to believe and know what we need to believe and know as well.
At least that's changing. Sinead, did you have a comment? Sinead, did you?
Yes, thank you, Alan. Just really quickly, I was just thinking, how great this conversation is and how, valuable and precious it is to have these conversations, because it's like food, right? It's nourishing and it sends energy out, energy and vibration that we need to send out. Then that made me think about how we're all very fond of, and I mean humans in general, we're very fond of talking, right? We like to share our thoughts, our ideas, our opinions, our knowledge, our experience, and that has a valuable place. But I think that equally important, maybe even more so during this whole process while we work towards a system of diplomacy, is listening. And I'm a deaf person. I have a 90% hearing loss, and I know there's a reason for that. There's a reason why I have this deafness in this lifetime. So part of my own path with experiencing ETs and their communication is how important listening is. And people think that listening is just with your ears, right? We think of it as a very physical thing. Listening is so much more than that. We do it with our eyes, we do it with our energy fields, we do it with our ears, we do it with our instincts, you know? So that form of like really in-depth receptivity and listening to ourselves, to others, to whatever is happening to us, I think is going to be a very important part of creating this, because it's really easy to throw out lots of, you know, words and ideas, and it's juicy stuff and it's wonderful. But the listening, the being quiet, you know, the being quiet and the being still and the being receptive is extremely important as well. So
I would like to add one thing to that, if I may. Going back to what I told you earlier about the fact that we did an EEG reading when I was in a channeling state, they found out that when Bashar was talking, the energy state was very high, but the energy state went higher when he was listening. And I think
let me get
exactly what Sinead is saying.
Oh, let me just get Danny into the conversation, because he is the guy going to Washington, representing, in a sense, the people and pushing the UFO question forward. So how are you going to lay out the fact, here we have people ambassadors to ETs. How are you going to approach that? What's your strategy going to Washington and talking about this?
Well, a lot of it is to try to have diplomatic relationships between the UFO community and our government to begin with. I mean, the formal structures of the United States government have been for 75 years in this posture that this just isn't true. And that if anybody tries to say that it's true, they're going to be excoriated and attacked and discredited. And now for the first time, they are being pushed into a situation where they have to at least pretend to be, quote, evaluating it, as distinct from investigating. They haven't admitted they're going to investigate it yet. They're just evaluating it. So what I'm trying to do is establish diplomatic relationships with the people inside the United States government who are in the process of trying to figure out what to do about this right now. They feel that they've been pressed by Luis Elizando and by Chris Mellon, particularly, having revealed these videos, which are not by any stretch of the imagination the best.
Alan, people are asking who this is. And
I sorry, this is Danny Sheehan. This is Luis Elizando's lawyer. He's our guy going to Washington to present the fact that, yes, we are being visited. They're not Russian or Chinese. They are these other beings. So Danny Sheehan, the people's lawyer. So go ahead, Danny.
Well, it's just that I was legal counsel for the Disclosure Project back in 2001. I was legal counsel for Stephen Bassett's Citizens Commission to vet the different witnesses that would be presented to the Congress. I've brought high-ranking military officers to their congressmen and senators to present their direct knowledge about this and try to get them to respond to it. I've never been convinced that the best policy is to be trying to get the people who are hiding the information to reveal the information, as you've been talking about. I think that obviously the best evidence from a strictly lawyer point of view is to have you have the experience yourself.
Right.
And I was directly involved in the citizen diplomacy program of reaching out to Gorbachev back when he was just Secretary of Agriculture in the Soviet Union, setting up a diplomatic communication between him as a citizen and our citizens to try to persuade him to undertake glasnost and perestroika, which he did. In my staff person, I was chief counsel at the Jesuit National Headquarters in their National Social Ministry Office, their public policy office. And my staff person ended up becoming the president of the Gorbachev Foundation. And the Gorbachev Foundation set up a whole series of meetings with former presidents and secretaries of state and secretaries of defense to try to discuss having a new, more modern paradigm, a new, more modern worldview. And we discussed in some of those meetings the implications of contact with an extraterrestrial civilization and extraterrestrial beings. And that whole process was underway when 9/11 occurred. And so that I'm a great believer in citizen diplomacy. I'm a great believer in trying to kind of get out around the institutional structures of a national security state that insists upon perceiving the ET phenomenon strictly in terms of whether they're a threat to our national security or whether they're violating our airspace or whatever the other panoply of sources of anxiety they have.
So
So
no, but how close are you to saying, guess what? There are people having contact, that they're here, that they're intelligent, they're here to help. I mean,
well, it's interesting. The latest lengthy interview that we did, I participated in with Luis Elizando, whom, as you probably know, was the head. He was the executive director
right.
of the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Project in the Pentagon. The latest lengthy interviews I've had, for example, with the Associated Press with Lou, the key is getting Lou to tell what it is that he believes, to really get him to utilize his stature and status as the person who ran the investigations to come forward to the people and talk to the people about it. So what we're trying to do is trying to figure out the parameters inside the Defense Department right now, what the protocols are with regard to being able to talk about this, because we're hoping to get Lou and Chris Mellon and other people that have been inside these programs to be able to come forward and share their own judgments about this at this point. And in the latest interviews, which have not been public yet, but that Lou has been emphatic about the fact that he has in intelligence language a high degree of confidence that these vehicles are not Russian and are not Chinese. And that may seem to people who've had the direct experience and who are channeling extraterrestrials, etc., that may seem an awful long ways from the ball. Right. Of just saying they're not Russian, they're not Chinese, but it's extraordinarily important to marry that particular position with the assertion on the part of the United States Defense Department that these are real vehicles, and the statements being made allegedly in the report that's coming up that they're not ours, that these are not our technologies. So if they're not our technologies and they're not Russian, they're not Chinese, then the question gets posed is, well, what are they? And when you can get people from inside the government structure starting to articulate what it is they have been talking about inside government circles about what these beings may be, and you start hearing them talk about the options being extraterrestrial, extra-dimensional, or some extraordinarily sophisticated aspect of the human species that live underground and have come from some ancient time, and they've lived underground for lengthy periods of time, and that they come out from under the ocean in these vehicles. To have that kind of a conversation going on inside the United States Pentagon, and now in interviews with the Associated Press and in the New York Times, et cetera, is in fact a substantial advance for people who've been having the experience, like yourselves, who've been attempting to try to communicate to people the importance of these kind of experiences. So that there's this extraordinarily fluid time going on right now, pursuant to which there's a whole set of evaluations going on about what to be done about this experience that people are having and about this phenomenon. So it's a pretty extraordinary period.
It's an amazing time, and you're really our guy in Washington. Wouldn't you say, like, it's do you feel like pressure, or you feel excitement that you are central to this whole disclosure phenomena?
Well, I don't know. I'm not.
I've
been in these places a lot. That I represented the New York Times in the Pentagon Papers case to publish all 47 volumes of the classified reports. I was, after the Bailey's office, we represented James McCord, who was the lead wiretapper for the Watergate burglary, who wrote the letter to Judge Sirica blowing the whistle on Nixon. So you get sort of used to these things in a certain sense. But in this particular case, that Lou Elizando asked me to be his legal counsel, knowing that I was legal counsel to the Disclosure Project,
right?
Knowing that I was legal counsel to the Citizens Commission on ETs and extraterrestrial life, and he knew that in fact I was the one that worked with the New York Times to expose these alleged national security top secret thing. So he knew that in coming to me. So that there's this dynamic that's involved in my relationship with him that has to do with lifting up this information and getting it out to the people of the world.
Do you think you can push it enough so there will be congressional hearings about this if the Elizondo case gets out there?
Yeah, but I mean, I've also had a lot of experience with congressional hearings. I mean, congressional hearings are seldom real. You know, there are always these dog and pony shows. They've already gotten figured out what the questions are going to be. They've already had to submit their written answers or else they wouldn't get to testify. You know, there's a whole set of choreographing going on, you know, with people in both political parties kind of jockeying for time. You know, it's not the be all and end all. But on the other hand, in the same way that people got much more responsive to this issue after the New York Times said that it was true, and even more people got involved when 60 Minutes said that it's true. So if you can get the United States congressional committees and have C-SPAN broadcasting it around the country, and people, especially in the summertime, you know, we like to have these exciting Watergate trials, the Senate Intelligence Committee trials with Frank Church. We would like to have the Iran-Contra committee hearings. You know, this can be summer fare, and if we can get that to happen, where there's a lot of congressional hearings going on, especially if the Congress people are not really in control of the process. They very seldom ever agree to allow their instrumentalities to be utilized to actually investigate anything or to run any risk whatsoever that information is going to be coming out to the American people that isn't to their personal benefit politically. And so that we'll see.
But something's possible. I just want to ask Grant, do you have a question for Danny? Because he's going to Washington on Wednesday to have a meeting with the Inspector General. And that will maybe open up the case. Do you have anything you want to say? Because I also have other questions. I know you have to go soon.
I just have to, Bob Brown wants me to go down and listen to the next speaker. So I just have to be, yes. Yeah,
Grant.
Yes, Grant.
Well, no, just maybe one to give us an idea of how many investigations are being held, and because it's not just the one, right? There's Luis Elizando has a 60-page. And the other question I had is, are you the main person? Because I'm sure Luis Elizando wouldn't have been able to file his 60-page thing without you. Are you the main guy that's sort of setting stuff up? And how many investigations are there in terms of what you wanted?
I can say that Lou and I worked together on his complaint that he was filing. And there are about 4 different divisions or subdivisions inside the Inspector General's office that are actively involved in what they are framing as evaluations. And that there's the one that was in direct response to Lou, that they had an initial response from the whistleblower retaliation subdivision. Then there was a second one that contacted him because some of the actions that were taken against him were after he was employed. And so that it wasn't technically inside the jurisdiction of the whistleblowers because you had to still be employed to be filing your complaint. There was another one that we're going to be meeting with on Wednesday, which is the space, missiles, and nuclear division. And then there's the one that issued the May 3rd memo, the very same day that Lou filed his complaint. Another division, which is a space intelligence division, issued a memo saying that they were going to be undertaking an evaluation to actually determine or to evaluate the degree of activities that have been undertaken by the Defense Department relating to the UAP phenomenon. That's much broader. And they actually felt compelled on the face of the memo to say, and we may expand the actual scope of our evaluation as the process goes on. And they began to elucidate what some of the military units are that they were going to be investigating or evaluating. And they also said that they may expand that to include additional ones. So that what you've got there, you got 4 different sub-agencies inside the Inspector General's office, all engaged in some type of, quote, evaluation process about the UAP phenomenon. What I've said a number of times is that whatever it is they're going to do is going to be completely dependent upon what the American people and the press do. If the American people start getting really interested in this and demanding that they look into this more, and the press are pressing on them to find out what they're doing, are they going to stage a real investigation about this? The more of that goes on, the broader they're going to go. But as of right now, I've laughed about it. I've actually said it a couple of times. I said it to Blumenthal, Ralph Blumenthal, of the New York Times the other day when he and I were talking. I said, that it reminds me very much of the movie Chinatown, where in Chinatown, Jake Gittes, who's Jack Nicholson character, is asked by Evelyn Mulwray, the Faye Dunaway character. She said, well, what did you do before you became a private investigator? And he said, I was a detective for the Los Angeles Police Department assigned to Chinatown. And she said, well, what did you do? And he said, as little as possible. He said, as little as possible. And she said, well, why is that? He said, well, because you couldn't always tell what was going on in Chinatown. And that's what's happening right now. I think that the various subdivisions of the Inspector General's office are trying to do as little as possible because they can't tell what's going on inside the Defense Department. They can't tell whether the protocols have changed. They can't tell what it is they really ever knew about. They can't tell whether they know about anything or nothing. They don't know what's going on here. And they don't want to be the ones that push to find out, because historically, anybody who's been pushing to find out what's been going on inside the United States government about the UFO issue has been excoriated, and their careers have been destroyed. So that they're still operating under the old paradigm of, please don't say anything about this. We would have Navy pilots who were surrounded by these things, flying all around them and going at like 43,000 miles an hour everywhere, and they didn't even dare report it because they knew from all of their friends, if you ever try to report this, the first thing that happens is you get sent to get a psychiatric exam. And they used to send it to John Mack, who I also represented about this issue. So that's we don't know yet.
Will we ever know who that person is or organization that's been suppressing this since 47, and will we get back to 47 in these hearings?
I'm planning on finding out.
Right.
Yeah.
You're planning, but that means tracing it back to the whole Roswell or before even.
It does.
And is there really a trail that leads back there?
There's always the trail.
There is.
There's always a trail. The question is being able to track it.
Can I ask a personal question?
Yes, sure.
Yeah. Danny, you started out, you wanted to be an astronaut. Is this going to be the highlight of your career in terms of where you are right now? Have you always waited for something like this?
Well, I've always been assuming that this time would come when we would actually get to this investigation, because what's necessary is to have an adequate base from which to do an investigation, that there's adequate forums that are going to be listening, that there's adequate news coverage that's being covered, there's an adequate interest on the part of the American people. You have to have all of these things functioning before you can actually engage in a case or an investigation that's going to bring about significant change. And so this one has been broiling for some time, for 75 years now. I was 2 years old when Roswell happened. So, and I wasn't paying much attention to it at the time, but it didn't take me long to find out about it. As soon as I discovered what stars were, and I realized, whoa, look at this. There's all those other star systems with suns and planets going around them. I mean, this is really foolish what we're doing down here to each other. Doesn't somebody have a little higher perspective on what's going on? I'm delighted to
know if Darryl had anything he would like.
I just wanted to say, first of all, it's a pleasure to meet you, Dan. And I'm speaking for myself, but I think I'm probably speaking on behalf of all of us when I say I really deeply appreciate your efforts on behalf of this whole subject, and anything that gets anyone talking about this more, I think is really important. So I just want to say thank you so much for what you're doing.
Yeah, same here. Absolutely.
Carolyn Cory is also. But is there anything you think you would want to tell Danny to say to the guys in Washington, based on your perspective, Darryl or Carolyn? I mean, because you have this 38-year relationship with these beings, and so you're sort of a bridge.
Well, the only thing I can think of at the moment is the old chestnut of scientists saying, look, aliens are very alien, and we don't really know how they think, but we know exactly how they're going to communicate with us. And yet when you give them something that's outside the box, they say, no, that's not right. We know exactly. It's going to be by radio. It's going to be this. It's going to be that. I would just suggest the idea in some way, shape, or form is just to be open to being aware that there may be more avenues for contact than we think, and just to be aware that those avenues may actually be more prominent for them than they are for us. So just that idea going along. It's not even anything you necessarily have to say to anyone, but just the idea that it's not necessarily going to come over the radio. It's not necessarily going to be the sci-fi scenario. And that way they can sort of be maybe more open to looking around and seeing what might actually represent other forms of communication. That's my only suggestion, but it's completely up to
why
you.
it has to be a public discussion. Right, thank you. It has to be all out on the table so we can actually look at it together from a scientific, psychological, sociological, technological point of view. Is that your vision, Danny, and for the future of this discussion?
We'll see. I think that the institute that we're talking about, given the access to technology now, of being able to have something like the observation deck campus, where they have different little colleges. Basically, people have their own little rooms and workshops and avatars, and they can go into the conference room together and have that. From a technological point of view, we can have a repository to bring information into a single place, where the differing UFO groups and individual researchers, et cetera, can each set up their little shops and start presenting this stuff in some sort of a comprehensive way. That we have a physical facility up in Clear Lake, just 100 miles north of San Francisco, where there's a physical facility, perhaps down the road sometime. Once the constituencies get built up, and there's adequate interest in having physical gatherings about these things, but at the outset, to work with the kind of technologies that are available and start getting the information into one centralized place, where a lot of the people in the country, as they start to become more and more interested in being, quote, allowed, being authorized to look into this subject, where there can be a place, like, for example, Jordy Peace, who has the Rogue Metaphysical Library up in Ashland, Oregon. He's got access there to almost every interview that's ever been conducted, every conference, every kind of interview, every book that's been written, and if we can get them up online and funnel them through something like the observation deck, to have the Rogue Metaphysical Library there, put it up online so people can actually get access to that information themselves, so that we can generate a dynamic within the American public and in the world where people are really anxious to find out about this, where they really want to, for example, where each of your experiences, where you can be interviewed about them, like you probably already have been bunches of times, but be interviewed about them and set forth your story in this totally credible way, so people can get access to it there. Because a lot of the people who come from, a position of not knowing a lot about this, they would say, holy mackerel, I listened to this one woman and she was so credible. She didn't have antenna, or tinfoil hats or anything. And was talking about having these experiences. I believed her. And that's how people are going to get moved. It is true. It is true that the one major thing that can move people is a direct experience themselves.
Right.
But there's going to be people who are going to come and volunteer for the diplomat program to be adequately trained. There's going to require discipline, study. You can't just say, oh, here, you're volunteering to go meet with the UFO people. Here, let's get you up on a ship and talk to them. We've got to be a little more circumspect than that.
No, but what about rolling out in Congress? Eric Davis in the July 24th New York Times 2012 said, he briefed members of Congress on crash retrievals. Well, that's the time saying that. Are we close to any of that? Because it's already been out in the paper.
We'll see.
We'll see.
A lot of it has to do with how the New York Times covers this, how 60 Minutes covers it, how the evening news, whether MSNBC gets it. It's clear that Fox News, strangely enough,
I know.
a few of the people are really getting on top of this thing.
It's also been on CNN
we've got to get
several times. It's been on CNN several times.
We've got to get the people involved in this. We've got to make this as exciting as a World Series, or as the next chapter of Game of Thrones. That you have to get people interested and excited about wanting to know about this. It's an exciting subject.
Well, Grant says it's the Super Bowl of all stories. So you and Mark are presenting a people's platform, right? So that's I know you have to go. Yeah. But what does that consist of? I mean, in a way, it's up to all of us, everyone here, everyone listening. What does it take? What do you vision to create this platform?
Well, that actually Mark is going to be instrumental in this. He's helping to conceive of how this can be done virtually. But I need to let him.
I know.
Okay. I can answer that question.
Thank you so much for everything. Yes. You are our guy in Washington, Danny.
No, guy in Washington.
No, really.
Right.
You're speaking for the American people. All of us who've been at this for so long.
I'll do my very best.
Well, you will.
Absolutely.
Thanks so much for being on the program.
Thank you, guys.
Mark, that is an exclusive, Mark. Yeah, Darryl.
Yeah. I just wanted to say thank you to everyone because I actually need to go as well. But it was a real pleasure. Thank you so much for the platform and for doing all of this. And it was a pleasure to meet every single one of you. This is wonderful. And I hope you all have a wonderful, wonderful evening.
Grant, did you have anything you want to say to Darryl, Grant? Because you've been waiting to talk to him for a second. Anything?
No, I'll let him go. We'll get him another thing.
All right, we'll get you. Thanks so much, Darryl.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to sign off as well.
Okay, well, we'll just...
Sorry, gang, I killed the party.
No, you killed the party, right. No, we'll just wrap it up here. But Mark, why don't you tell them about the citizens process that you want to create? Thanks, Carolyn. Do you have anything final you want to say before you leave?
I think I already said what I really believe in is that it's time more than ever before to just take back your power and just speak up and stop worrying about this and that or waiting for government to tell us this. Otherwise, I wouldn't do that. Just be out there, just do it, just talk about it. There's so much support system, so many resources. So that's what I would say. And the government, whatever they're going to come up with is just going to be an added validation to what we already know. So let's just all keep going and support each other.
Right. No, thanks. Thanks, Carolyn.
Bye, everybody. It was great seeing you again. Take care. Bye, Mark. Bye, Sinead. See you later. Bye,
I'm
Alan.
glad you got to meet Danny. So that's something.
Bye, Caroline.
Okay.
Yeah. Bye, sweetie.
And just to wrap it up, Mark's going to go, and then Sinead, and then Grant has something to say, then it'll be great.
So so I guess I'll just share with you this vision that I've had for quite a while since Danny and I started the New Paradigm Institute in 2015, and that is to create a school without walls, an institute without walls, meaning that wherever you are in the world, you could participate in a institute as a student, as a volunteer, as an expert on this subject, and easily present in a classroom or an auditorium setting what you know, what your experience has been. So that's an element of it. But as far as this People's Disclosure Initiative, what we're really attempting to do is to establish an international body or consortium of leaders and other organizations that are interested in this topic of how do we go about making contact and what would we say? Where would this take place? And how would we, as representatives of the human family, present this information to them? And it's complex. It's a very complex problem because you have multiple demographics. You have different languages. There's different levels of consciousness, we'll call it that, in terms of their openness or their own personal experience to this or lack of. And so it really needs a multi-pronged approach in terms of engaging people. And if anybody knows Jeffrey Moore, he wrote a book called Crossing the Chasm. And in that book, he introduces something called the technology life cycle, the technology adoption life cycle. And he identifies 5 distinct demographics with regards to a potential customer for purchasing a new technology, a new kind of good technology, innovative technology. And the book is really designed to help entrepreneurs that have a great technological idea on successfully marketing it without, imploding, which often happens. And the chasm in the book refers to this, the shift between a early market, what's he calls the innovators and early adopters, which are your first customers, and then the mass market, which is your early mass market, late mass market, and laggards. And I really think we need to have that sophisticated of an approach on this topic, and realize that we have these 5 markets, or categories of people that we need to develop a message for, and that it's multilingual, multicultural, and religion factors into this. And so this is a really big undertaking, but it has to be international in scope. It has to be transparent, and we have to have a way to vet people who are going to be the representatives for these different countries, and then let them speak for us, in effect, or at least be spokespersons for this movement.
How does that sound, Sinead, to you?
To me, that sounds amazing. Amazing. I love that it would be transparent. I love that it would be international. I love everything you said, Mark. Yeah. 2 thumbs up.
I also want to ask Grant.
Let me make a comment on that
That
first.
was probably Danny's last interview before he goes to Washington, which is an exclusive, Mark, for our new life. So
That's great.
what do you think? What do you think he can accomplish there with what he's intending?
Oh, I said, as soon as I heard Danny Sheehan was a lawyer, I said, we can actually win this thing. I mean, this is like, it's almost unraveling like a Hollywood script, where I think what's going to happen is they're going to come out and say, we've got so many sightings. We don't know this is alien, and the roof is going to blow off. I mean, it's just going to go crazy. Even Bloomberg called it a couple days ago, or Blumenthal called it a feeding frenzy. When you get the New York Times, Washington Post, Politico, all these papers feeding on this thing. And he said he couldn't even do a story now if he tried, because they won't let him in, because all these top reporters are now using their sources. And what's going to happen is you're going to get past the thing where they're going to say, okay, it's for real. And then everybody's going to say, okay, what's going on? Who are they? Where are they coming from? And the pressure is going to be immense. And that's where I see like Danny Sheehan coming in, and we've never had anybody on the inside that has any power. We've always been, you take what you get. They tell you to get lost, you get lost. Unless you got a lawyer, you can't sue them or whatever. We've got this guy on the inside who is like the ultimate guy that takes on everybody. I just fear for the guys that have got to take on Danny Sheehan.
Oh, he's the big gun.
That's why I asked him, do you believe you're actually where you believe you wanted to be your whole life? He's waited his whole life to be inside.
Wait, what do you say? What's that,
He
Grant?
is the
What was
big
the last
gun.
thing you said?
He is the big guns. And this is going to be, like he said, the summer. This is what the big story for the summer. It's going to go on the whole summer.
And Danny is in the center of it. He is a people's lawyer. He, he worked for Karen Silkwood, the Karen Silkwood case, when the nuclear industry bumped her off. I mean, there's so much public issues and the Standing Rock. So this is the biggest story he could possibly take on.
Yeah,
because this affects the whole planet.
Because you have now the witnesses, like the Nimitz witnesses and all this kind of stuff. But you wait until they get like Danny Sheehan going on Fox and stuff. They're going to be following Danny Sheehan around like, this is the guy, and he did this and he did that. He shut down the nuclear industry, and this is they haven't found Danny Sheehan yet. But to me, as soon as I heard Danny Sheehan was involved, I said, man, we could actually win this thing, because Danny isn't going to give up. Danny knows
when you say win this thing, though, Grant, what does that look like, winning this thing? What do you mean?
Well, it's going to spiral. I say that the beginning is only starting. As soon as they say, yeah, this is for real, and start playing, the 2-step and trying to walk around it, that's when everybody is going to realize this thing's for real. And I said this many years ago already. Once the major media realizes they've been had, it's game over, because it's going to be like Watergate. It's going to be like everybody put your top reporters on this, dig as hard as you can, and it's going to all start to unravel really, really fast. And that's what it comes down to. The more pressure they're under, the more it's going to unravel, the faster it's going to move. I think this thing is going to move really, really fast starting at the end of this month.
It is unraveling because the news even Tucker Carlson, who I never really liked, but he's coming out to, you mean we've been lied to? He said that right out there. So I think a lot of the newscasters will say, look, the government is saying there's no such thing as UFOs, and suddenly you're telling us there is? Yeah. What's going on? Who do we believe? And so Grant is someone, Mark, and everyone who has knows where all the moving pieces in this thing is. He's tracked every US president and their relationship to the UFO phenomena. So Grant, how will it play out if Danny gets his way in Washington? What do you see unfolding now?
Well, I think it's going to be more the media, but the media is going to just start scooping this, scooping that. More and more pieces are going to come out. They're going to be under more pressure to release more stuff. And this is like the new Trump story. I mean, everybody's been looking for a replacement for the Donald Trump story. This is going to be it. I think this is going to go viral. I really do, because they're going to first make their statement and everybody thinks they're going to walk away. This is just going to light the fire. If they say, yeah, this is real, but we're not saying it's alien. Everybody's
already said it's real.
Yeah, they have said that. But I mean, officially, where they stand up and officially say it, like if they are forced to do a news conference. I've heard that Biden has given authorization to NASA to speak. I mean, it's just taking off. It's just and you know what these stories are like. Once it goes viral in the media, it goes viral and it just starts to accelerate and accelerate. And this is the story they've all been waiting for. And Danny Sheehan is the ideal guy.
That's why we need to be prepared. That's why I wrote my book, Preparations for the New Realities of Extraterrestrial Existence, that I'll put in the chat here, because people are going to be upended. They're going to suddenly, their reality is not going to be what they thought it is. And it's going to upset a lot of people, especially the fundamentalists, the right, you know, all those people that, or whatever angle they're at. But the world is not what we've been told it is. And that's upsetting. That's and it's also exciting. So,
and I say it's going to be upsetting to the scientists as well, when scientists suddenly realize it's not a random, meaningless universe. And there's, if you get into the thing with multi-dimensions, then where do you go with the Big Bang and with you know, a big explosion with all these nuts and bolts banging into each other, and suddenly you're talking about multi-dimensional world and ultra-terrestrials? You might as well say they're coming from heaven. I mean, the stories are just going to be unbelievable, and people know the amount of people that will follow this. This is like a rating bonanza. They used to use it to push up the ratings. I mean, everybody, I can predict this is going to be absolutely viral. But
well, the news has been very boring lately, so this is the big thing now.
Yeah. The other thing that Grant and Mark, I know, talk about, and you, Grant, and especially in the last couple of years, Grant used to look at just the nuts and bolts. One day he had this boom, and he writes about this in my chapter in the book. It's like, oh my God, this is about consciousness. How do you think Congress can deal with the idea about consciousness? They're still looking at whether it's real or not. So what do they need to do to shift paradigms and you know, all that, Grant? And then I'll ask you. So, yeah.
Well, that's where it sort of spirals. Right now, they're playing the game of briefing the armed services and intelligence, which means weapons. But I said, why didn't they brief the Science and Technology Committee? Because Bush said to Carter, he said, if you want the answers to this, if you want the records for the people, you should go to the House Science and Technology Committee. So even Luis Elizando made a statement later after that said, well, maybe if this thing opens up, we go into science and technology. And Danny Sheehan has a degree in divinity. I mean, that was how he started. He was brought in by the Carter administration, by Marcia Smith, to give a lecture to the top 50 scientists at JPL on the religious implications of this discovery of extraterrestrial life. This thing is just starting. I mean, and it'll go spiral and people will pick up this angle and this angle. I can just see this is going to be absolute, like a bomb going off. But what you need that statement. Wow. Say, okay, this is real, but we're not going to talk about the rest. That's exactly what the media wants to hear. And then somebody's going to break a story, another story. I heard Fox is doing a big 60-minute thing. They're all jumping on the thing. And that's what Ralph Blumenthal said, is it's a feeding frenzy with the top reporters now to try to break the story, because this is Pulitzer Prize stuff. And the whole house of cards, I think, is about to collapse.
Right. And that's why we need to have these discussions, Mark. Thank you for letting this happen, because people who are involved in this need to sort of be out in front to say, well, don't freak out. It's about something bigger, you know?
Exactly.
So, and Mark, any
And
final words?
You know what, at the same time, sorry, I was giggling to myself earlier. We were talking about who was going to be upset and people getting upset, because one thing about human nature is we always have to have something to complain about, right? We have to be upset about something. We seem to do that or want that. So this is just, yeah, I mean, this is just drama, right? It's more of the same. This is what we always do. But it's kind of like what Caroline was saying. We just have to stay true to what our goal is, right? And the goal is more important than any of the fuss. The goal is more important than the politics and the power structures and all of that. So I just think it's funny, you know, people getting upset. People are just very attached to their belief systems, and they have a hard time being flexible with that.
The goal is just the truth, that we're not alone in the universe. Why is that such a difficult concept to take?
The goal is disclosure.
But there's still a point above, because that's what everybody wants. Everybody says, when's disclosure coming? And it's like, what do you mean by disclosure? Oh, they got to tell us the truth. We're not alone. I mean, we've known that for a while. It's beyond that story, because what's going to happen next is not just the idea we're not alone. It's the whole paranormal thing. It's when you start talking to the experiencers, or where Sinead and I do an interview with 3 people who say the world is completely perfect. One's a near-death experience person. One's a person who's just sitting in a chair. One's in a float tank. This whole paranormal thing about how does the world work, this spiritual thing is going to start, especially when you get into the whole idea, this may not be ET. And Luis Elizando's gone there, and Kit Green has gone there. And there's, the Politico reporter, national security reporter, said there was an investigation done by the Defense Department. Nobody's picked it up yet. He said it, by the Defense Department, to look at whether this is here now in this dimension right here. We can't see them. So when you get into that whole thing, the whole idea of how does reality work starts to come into thing. Forget about where we're alone. That's just the starting point. It's all this other stuff. Suddenly the spiritual thing. It's like almost the idea is you better buy a suit and tie because it's time to go back to church. It's almost that kind of thing, that there's another aspect to this thing other than just the fact that we're not alone. It's all, what's all this rest of this weird stuff, and where are they from? And that's where I think it really gets exciting.
I couldn't agree more, Grant. Amen to what you just said. And I believe our new church is going to be getting under the stars and calling the ETs in, using something like Greer's CE5 protocol. And many of the groups that are out there have developed their own meditative practice that result in, you know, these beings or these ships or something, some anomaly appearing in the sky that's clearly not an aircraft. And so learning that there's a, you know, cause and effect relationship between summoning, using consciousness to something, you know, unusual appearing in the sky is a huge first step. And for me, that was my first contact experience. That blew my mind wide open. It was only hours after that that I had my face-to-face contact.
Because I wanted to say,
I just want to make a point that we've actually, Mark, your video, the Jimmy's video, and where you're on at First Contact, Breaking the Veil, has got huge numbers on my YouTube channel. This thing really took off, and you see people starting to pick up on that thing, where that's the new thing, where people start looking at that, or even Darryl Anka with Bashar, where people start looking at that and taking it more serious. And that's where the answers are going to be, because I don't believe the answers are in the government. They're never going to tell you. They're always going to have some guy try to get a patent or national security or whatever. It's the experiencers on the street. When you start talking to them and they start becoming on camera and they start telling you what's actually going on and the contacts that are being made, that's when it really takes off, because then it moves out of this whole idea about let's just get the aliens and shoot them and get their technology, and we'll have, you know, better cars and more cheaper energy and stuff like that. It's way beyond just this simple physical thing that we have aliens or wherever that's coming. It's this whole other aspect of the spiritual and the idea that we can actually interact with this. And there are people that are interacting with this phenomena, and they can tell you what's actually going on, whereas the government will not tell you what's going on.
Well, that's why Carolyn, Cory, and Darryl Anka are here. But the other thing that Grant just said, that it's kind of like shocked me or woke me up. These may not be aliens. We're calling something aliens, but that's just the name we give to this phenomena that we can't describe. So let's call it aliens. But it might not be aliens at all. I said to Grant, you can't tell me they're not aliens. I just wrote a book about it. It's aliens.
But but you see a lot of them doing that. Let's remember when Reed said, do not call them little green men. I don't want to go to little green men. When Leslie Kean and Blumenthal wrote the book, the New York Times article, they said, we're not saying aliens. We're not saying aliens. Then Luis Elizando says, we're not saying aliens. We're not saying. And what I hear behind that is the fact that, yes, they have bodies. Yes, they have crafts, but they aren't 100% sure where they're from, unless, because they don't have any passports from Zeta Reticuli or something like that. There's this question, I believe, in the background where they know this is a little more complex than aliens, and that's where it gets into this interdimensional thing and this multidimensional thing, which gets into a whole different aspect of the whole idea, or the way you told me. Not only have you got it wrong about how the world works, it's exactly the opposite of what you think it is. You think you know, you just think you know.
Yes.
You haven't got a clue what's going on. That's what it seems to be indicating when they keep saying it's not alien, it's not alien, it's not alien. It means they know something beyond the alien thing. This is more complex than aliens. And that's what Jacques Vallée's always said. I'd be very surprised if this turns out to just be extraterrestrials coming. The government knows something. The people in behind know something beyond the alien thing, that this is some sort of complex thing that has to do with the nature of reality.
Oh, they've known it for a very, very
Doesn't
long
that
time. They've known it for a very long time.
But Mark, doesn't that expand the whole issue that we're talking about? If we say it's not aliens, then who are we? What does this mean? What is consciousness? What is the essence of it all? This is the question I think whoever these visitors are pushing us towards.
Okay.
I think the whole thing's exciting.
As a yoga.
Well, one of the things that if you talk to experiencers, what they'll tell you is when they ask them, are you an alien? And they say, no, that would not best describe who I am, or the idea. And so what I would say is it comes down to all the world's a stage, all the men and women and aliens are about actors. They have their entrances and exits, and each man plays many roles. We are all etheric beings coming in, playing a role. And because we played King Henry VIII in a high school play doesn't mean we're King Henry VIII. We have to remember who we actually are. We're all etheric beings. They're coming into this world, becoming physical, going back. And that comes to this spiritual idea, is that when people suddenly realize that we are etheric beings playing aliens, playing humans, and that's all this big game thing, then it's this whole higher aspect that everything starts to crumble. All the reality, like MIT guys going to MIT suddenly decide, oh my God, I spent $50,000 a year for tuition, and everything I believed was wrong. And the scientific paradigms, everything starts to collapse as to what's real, what's not real. How does the world really work? And that's when we get past the point of just gathering material and realizing there's more to life than just material matter.
Well, I think therein lies a really important element of this disclosure, and that is, it really does disrupt people's sense of identity and their concept of reality. And, there's danger in that. And that's, I think, one of the reasons that the government has been so ambivalent, if not outright, undermining of the fact that ETs exist, is because it does represent a sort of existential identity crisis for the human family. And that's something that I'm very interested in addressing at the New Paradigm Institute. This is a very important, probably the most important issue.
Yeah, well, they're just beginning to get upset by the fact that there's aliens, or what we're calling aliens. That just imagine where it will lead to places like Grant. You don't even know who we are, who you are, what our potential is. What were you going to say, Grant? You were going to say?
No, I was. There's a couple of other things that will come up, that will emerge. They haven't come up yet. I sort of poke the bear all the time on Twitter and Facebook, and I talk about is the U.S. Going to increase immigration if reptilians and grays decide that they want to immigrate to the United States? Can you imagine this problem of people saying, are we going to allow these people into our society? Or the idea that the United States of America is no longer the big fish, that now it's a world, almost like the one world government thing, where the world is talking and it's no longer just an American thing. There's so many more complicated things that are going to arise from this discussion, where we're going to realize, like, it's not the world we thought it was.
No more green cards. It's going to be blue cards.
But, not only just that, but the whole idea about vibration and vibrational realities, we will come out of this very simplified world into a whole new universe, a whole new possibility. And that's the exciting part. We're like children walking into a new room with all these toys, and it's like we're finding out we're going to be really educated on who we are in terms of a greater cosmology.
Yeah, I think you and I, all the people on this panel, know who we are. It's the people who don't know who are going to go, what? You mean this is all for real? Like, you and I know how it all works,
Right.
but it's if you're, and you have to have empathy for these people who haven't got a clue. They're not in the Super Bowl. They're not in the stadium. They have no idea what's going on. Where suddenly they're going, what are you talking about? It's like,
No, Alan, so we're gonna have to wrap. Alan, we're gonna have to wrap this up.
Okay,
And,
just final words,
thank you,
Mark. You
Grant.
have something?
Thank you.
Yeah,
Mark.
I have one final thought, I guess,
Go ahead.
if there's time. But
Yeah.
if we don't have time,
No,
that's
just
cool
one
too.
final thought. Go ahead.
All right, just one final thought. This issue about being children, I think it's a good analogy that collectively we are adolescents growing up to become adults in a galactic community. And we need to take that very responsibly. I don't think it's right, or we should think of it as, great new toys. I get to zip around in UFOs maybe if we, play our cards right here. I think we have some real introspection to do and realize that, we're going to be educated. And I think that's one of the things that we need to, as part of this diplomatic initiative, to reach out to them and say, what advice do you have for us?
Right.
And listen carefully to what they have been telling us. Yes, Darryl and
Carolyn, yeah.
and Carolyn and Sinead have all been saying the same thing, that yes, we have a lot to learn from other witnesses and contactees, but ultimately they are going to have a word, and we should listen. And
Well, also, that's the only thing.
No, thank you. No,
But that's the only thing that
Mark,
really the only thing that can really keep this planet together, with all the disassociation in the planet, is an outside force coming here to bring, and then we'll all have to come together as Earthlings.
exactly. That's what I say in my new book, Making Contact, which Grant and Darryl and Carolyn are all a part of. And this has been a really exciting, this has been an exclusive for New Life.
Oh, this is great. Also we'll have a big party for the book here in New York.
Yeah.
The
Yes.
next New Life Expo, the live one, finally after 2 years, be October 22nd, 3rd, and 4th. Be great to have you guys there, but I'm so happy that you came on this. And
Thank you.
this is going to be a summer.
Yeah, we're
every
doing
day
it.
is going to be special.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, we've organized a book signing in Ojai, California for anyone in Southern California. It's June 20th at 3 p.m. at the Love Social Cafe. Love Social Cafe. It's going to be a big event. We're going to have some guests there. Possibly Danny will be there. And of course, he's going to be there, and JJ and Desiree Hurtak.
Right.
And I'm trying to, I'm reaching out to Robert Salas, who's one of the original witnesses from the Disclosure Project. He lives in Ojai, just a few miles from me, and a good friend. So
I'm also having a book signing in Joshua Tree on June 17th, in LA on the 18th, possibly I'll be at the Disclosure Fest on the 19th, Ojai on the 20th, and back in New York at the end of the month.
And Grant, how do people get in contact with you?
I have a new podcast, Paranormal UFO Consciousness Podcast, and my Facebook is Presidential UFO.
And Sinead?
Sinead, and my Facebook is under my name, Sinead Whelan, and I do research and interviews with Grant, so my work is on his channels, his podcast channel and his YouTube.
And how was it meeting Darryl for you, Nate?
How was it? What? Sorry. Oh, that was wonderful. It was wonderful. I mean, he's a Canadian. What can I say? I'm a Canadian. He's a Canadian.
I haven't seen him a long time.
He gets points. But no, I'm a big Bashar fan, and Grant knows I've had this little printout of Bashar's sort of central tenets to life.
I have to bring
on
my
refrigerator for the past couple of
you
years.
have to bring your next
I have my
guest on.
next guest up. So again,
thank you, everyone.
all.
Thank you, Mark, for
Right,
making this
yeah,
happen,
thank you, Alan.
and
Thank you.
Danny and everyone. Look for Danny Sheehan in the news. You are going to see him, and you heard it here first on New Life.
I remember Dan from a long time ago.
Right.
He is the big gun.
He is. He's our, hope in Washington that this is going to blow up, as Grant said. So let's
Okay, I'm
see how
going
it goes.
to leave everybody.
Thank you,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank you so much,
Okay.
everyone.
Thanks, Grant.
Peace
Thanks,
and love.
Sinead.
Right.